A $5 billion railway, 472 kilometers of steel. And one question Kenya still has to answer. Was this a miracle of Chinese engineering or one of Africa's biggest infrastructure gambles? Built in just 3 years, the standard gauge railway was designed to connect the Port of Mombasa to the heart of East Africa. The dream was massive. Uganda, Rwanda, South Sudan, and even the mineral-rich regions of Congo, all linked to the Indian Ocean by one steel corridor. But then, the tracks stopped, billions in debt, a railway ending in Naivasha, and critics around the world calling it a Chinese debt trap. But now Kenya is attempting a comeback no one saw coming, finishing the railway without taking a single new Chinese loan. This is not just a railway story. This is a story about debt, power, engineering, and the future of Africa. The Grand Master Plan was to build an interconnected iron web, linking the Indian Ocean to landlocked nations like Uganda, Rwanda, and South Sudan, unlocking a massive consumer market of over 150 million people. But in 2019, the vision derailed. The tracks abruptly stopped in the middle of nowhere, leaving Kenya with a staggering $4.7 billion in debt, mostly owed to China. Critics immediately branded it a colossal white elephant. But this isn't your typical African debt trap story. In a shocking plot twist, Kenya recently announced a massive $4 billion revival plan to finally finish the transnational railway without a single new Chinese loan. So how did Chinese engineering conquer the wild to build this marvel in just 3 years? And how is Kenya pulling off the ultimate financial comeback to unite East Africa? Let's find out. To truly grasp why Kenya took a $5 billion gamble, we must zoom out and look at the map. East Africa is one of the continent's fastest-growing economic zones. However, geography presents a massive challenge. Nations like Uganda, Rwanda, South Sudan, and parts of the Democratic Republic of Congo are entirely landlocked. For them, international trade is impossible without a gateway to the ocean. That gateway is Kenya's Port of Mombasa. It is the absolute lifeline for millions of people and billions of dollars in trade. For over a century, the primary link between this crucial port and the deep African interior was a meter-gauge railway built by the British colonial empire back in 1901. History remembers it as the Lunatic Express, a project plagued by harsh terrain, tropical diseases, and notorious man-eating lions that terrorized the labor camps. But by the early 2000s, the Lunatic Express had become painfully obsolete. The trains were agonizingly slow, and the infrastructure was crumbling. A freight train carrying essential goods could take 2 grueling days just to travel the roughly 480 kilometers from Mombasa to the capital, Nairobi. The consequences were disastrous for the region's economy. Because the railway was failing, nearly 90% of all cargo had to be transported by road. The Mombasa-Nairobi highway transformed into a choked artery. Thousands of heavy trucks created endless traffic jams. Fatal accidents surged, and the sheer weight of the cargo destroyed the asphalt faster than it could be repaired. The transportation costs skyrocketed, suffocating Kenya's competitive edge. The country was sitting on an economic time bomb. They desperately needed a modern, high-capacity solution. And that is exactly when China entered the chat.
$10.8 billion Chinese-built railway is meant to supplement the current line built by British colonialists.
To build a 472-kilometer, 1,435-millimeter standard gauge railway from scratch, Kenya needed an engineering superpower. This is where China deployed its full turnkey model, providing the financing, the design, the hardware, and the builders. The price tag for Phase 1, a staggering $3.6 billion. China's Exim Bank bankrolled 90% of this cost, while the Kenyan government covered the remaining 10%. The contract was awarded to the China Road and Bridge Corporation, CRBC. What followed was a relentless masterclass in megaproject execution. Unlike similar projects in the West that often stall for decades due to red tape, the Chinese engineering machine moved at lightning speed. At peak construction, CRBC mobilized an army of 25,000 workers, combining Chinese technical specialists with tens of thousands of local Kenyans. By utilizing advanced prefabrication techniques, manufacturing massive concrete bridge segments off-site, and deploying heavy launch gantries to lay tracks simultaneously across multiple zones, they completed the entire 472-kilometer route in exactly 3 years. And this wasn't just about pouring concrete. China provided the entire ecosystem. delivered a starting fleet of 18 massive freight locomotives, 5 passenger engines, and over 60 double-stack wagons directly from Chinese factories to Mombasa. When operations began in 2017, the numbers shifted dramatically. The new passenger service, the Madaraka Express, hit speeds of 120 kilometers per hour, compressing a grueling 12-hour road trip into a smooth 4-hour ride. But the true economic weapon was freight. A single Chinese-built cargo train moving at 80 kilometers per hour could haul 216 containers. Mathematically, one train trip instantly removes 108 heavy trucks from the congested highway, cutting cargo transit time from several days to a single 8-hour shift. In just 36 months, China had completely rewired East Africa's logistical DNA. Building a megaproject at this speed is one thing, but doing it without destroying one of Africa's most iconic ecosystems is an entirely different engineering challenge. Right in the middle of the Mombasa Nairobi route lies the Tsavo National Park, Kenya's largest wildlife reserve, home to thousands of elephants, lions, and giraffes. The old colonial railway was built directly on the ground, creating a lethal barrier that split animal migration routes in half, resulting in countless wildlife casualties. The CRRBC engineering team knew that a high-speed train cutting through this territory at 120 kilometers per hour would be catastrophic. So they elevated the railway. Instead of laying tracks on the earth, the Chinese engineers designed massive viaducts, essentially building a railway in the sky. Throughout the Tsavo section, the SGR runs on towering concrete pillars, but they didn't stop there. They engineered 14 specific large-scale wildlife corridors and dozens of smaller culverts. These underpasses were built with a minimum clearance of 7 meters, high enough for the tallest adult giraffe to walk through comfortably without even lowering its head. To conquer the rugged terrain of the Great Rift Valley, the numbers are equally staggering. Across the entire SGR route, the engineering teams constructed 79 massive bridges, totaling over 43 kilometers of elevated viaducts. Where they couldn't go over, they went right through, blasting 8 separate tunnels through solid rock, covering a combined distance of 14.2 kilometers. They integrated 376 culverts and built 26 modern stations along the way. This wasn't just an infrastructure project, it was a delicate surgical operation on the African landscape, proving that massive steel and concrete networks could coexist seamlessly with nature. Following the massive success of Phase 1, Kenya immediately pushed forward. The plan was to extend the SGR further inland, connecting Nairobi to the town of Naivasha. This 120-kilometer extension, known as Phase 2A, was completed in 2019 at an additional cost of $1.5 billion, again funded by China's Exim Bank. They even built a massive inland container depot to streamline logistics. But then, the unstoppable Chinese megaproject machine abruptly ground to a halt. The master plan was to continue the tracks all the way to the Ugandan border town of Malaba, creating a seamless regional network. However, China pulled the plug on financing the remaining sections. Why? Because the numbers were starting to look terrifying. The staggering $5 billion price tag for the completed sections had severely bloated Kenya's national debt. Before the SGR, Kenya's debt-to-GDP ratio hovered around 42%. Within a few years, it spiked to over 60%. The railway was generating revenue, freight volume was up, and passenger numbers jumped from 812,000 in 2020 to nearly 2.7 million recently. But it wasn't enough. The operational costs and the aggressive loan repayment schedules were bleeding the Kenyan treasury. This financial strain gave birth to one of the most persistent controversies in modern African infrastructure, the debt trap diplomacy theory. Wild rumors spread globally that if Kenya defaulted on its loans, China would seize control of the Port of Mombasa, much like the Hambantota port incident in Sri Lanka. However, extensive audits and statements from both Kenyan officials and independent economists have largely debunked this. There is absolutely no evidence of a sovereign asset seizure clause in the SGR contracts. The port is safe, but the financial headache was very real. Kenya was left with a $5 billion railway that literally ended in an empty field in Naivasha, disconnected from its regional neighbors. To make this investment profitable, the tracks simply had to reach Uganda. And that is when Kenya made a stunning, unprecedented decision.
Chinese experience, they've built the Tibetan Railway, they've built long railway lines, passing through the parks. And when they build this, they take into consideration the needs for preserving the environment. Yeah, that experience is important in the African context.
I think most of the challenges we're able to overcome. If you're determined to get something, you will get something. Nature has just a way of opening doors for people who are really determined in life.
This can make me to tell my children when I'll give birth to kids one time in my lifetime. I'll be telling them about me working with the standard gauge railway, what I used to do here, and they'll be happy that their mom once did something nice in Kenya.
Meaning of the bridge basically is linking this group of people to the other group of people. So as you understand this group of people, the Chinese, and I understand my countrymen, then I connect in terms of language, in terms of way of thinking.
For years, the tracks ending abruptly in Naivasha served as a bitter symbol of stalled ambition. But Kenya was not going to let a $5 billion mega project rust in the savannah. In a stunning plot twist, the Kenyan government recently unveiled a massive $4 billion revival plan to finally push the railway to the Ugandan border by 2027. And the most shocking part? They are doing it without borrowing a single dime from Chinese banks. Instead of falling deeper into debt, Kenya activated an aggressive domestic financing strategy, the Railway Development Levy. This is a mandatory 2% tax imposed on all imported goods. Over the years, this fund has quietly accumulated massive capital. Now Kenya is weaponizing this domestic money to fund Phase 2B to the Lake Victoria port of Kisumu and Phase 2C to Malaba. While China's Exim Bank stopped the funding, Chinese technology remains the backbone of the railway. However, operational control is drastically shifting. The Chinese firm Afrastar, which managed the Madaraka Express since 2017, is actively transitioning power. By the end of 2025, Kenya Railways will take full control of operations and maintenance. Kenya is sending a powerful message. They used Chinese engineering to build the foundation, but now they hold the steering wheel. Kenya's bold revival plan is impressive, but a railway is only as powerful as its destination. The ultimate goal of the series was always to reach Kampala, the capital of Uganda. But while Kenya was busy securing its domestic funding, Uganda threw a massive geopolitical curveball. Originally, Uganda also planned to use Chinese loans to build its 273-kilometer section from the Kenyan border to Kampala. However, frustrated by years of financing delays from Beijing, Uganda officially terminated its agreement with the Chinese firm in 2023. Instead, in a stunning pivot, they signed a $2.9 billion contract with a Turkish construction giant, Yapı Merkezi. This Turkish contract introduces a fascinating engineering dilemma. The Turkish firm is building the Ugandan segment using European ARIMA standards, not Chinese specifications. The new Ugandan line is designed to be fully electrified from day one, unlike the Kenyan diesel-powered sections. So when the Kenyan tracks finally reach the border town of Malaba, engineers will face a complex technical puzzle, seamlessly integrating a Chinese-built, diesel-operated system with a European standard electrified network. It's an unprecedented logistical handshake. If successful, this $2.9 billion Ugandan project will slash cargo transit times from Mombasa to Kampala by an astonishing 70%, transforming the economics of the entire landlocked region. But the story doesn't end in Uganda. If we look at the master blueprint, Kenya and Uganda are merely the launch pads for a much grander geopolitical puzzle. The ultimate vision of this 1,435-millimeter standard gauge railway is to create an interconnected iron web spanning thousands of kilometers across East and Central Africa. The economic stakes are astronomically high. Right now, transporting a single shipping container by road from the Port of Mombasa to Kigali in Rwanda or Juba in South Sudan can take several grueling weeks and cost upwards of $4,000 to $5,000. It is a logistical nightmare that severely strangles regional growth. But a unified SGR network changes the math entirely. The proposed extensions aim to push the tracks beyond Kampala into Kigali, down to Bujumbura in Burundi, north to Juba, and crucially, deep into the mineral-rich heart of the Democratic Republic of Congo, reaching cities like Goma and Bunia. We are talking about unlocking access to trillions of dollars in untapped natural resources and connecting a landlocked consumer market of over 150 million people directly to global shipping lanes. To make this a reality, these landlocked nations have officially formed the SGR Cluster, a joint ministerial committee actively hunting for billions in development funding. If they succeed, this fragmented map will transform into the most powerful economic corridor on the African continent. Ultimately, the SGR is more than just steel and concrete. It is a bold statement. Kenya proved it can leverage Chinese engineering to lay the foundation, then independently take the financial wheel to shape its own future. If this regional master plan succeeds, it will rewrite the economic geography of Africa. What do you think of Kenya's massive megaproject gamble? Let us know below and subscribe for more. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.